Hey there, Business for Unicorns podcast listeners. This is Mark, and I'm here to tell you about an awesome free resource on businessforunicorns.com. If you ever find yourself feeling frustrated with your training gym because you know that there are all sorts of things you could work on, but you're not really sure how to prioritize, you don't know what's the most important thing to work on or what order you should be tackling your priorities, well, now is the time to go to businessforunicorns.com, click the button, and fill out our free self-assessment. With the Ultimate Training Gym Owner Report Card, you will gain immediate clarity on just where to be focusing your attention to create more positive impact on your community, to drive more revenue and take home income, and to do it all with less stress and more peace of mind. So go to businessofunicorns.com, click the button, fill out that free self-assessment, and start building a business and life you love today.
Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. And today, Fisher and I are talking about a topic I don't think we've covered together in a little while, which is time management, personal productivity. We figured it's the start of 2022. All of you are leaning in, trying to figure out how to make the most of this year, considering the last two have been questionable at best for some of us. So how do we make the most of it this year personally and for our teams and the people we manage? And so, Fisher, how are you thinking about personal productivity in 2022?
Well, the first thing I want to share is I came up with a good tagline for 2021. I think it should be 2021. It was better than 2020. So that's, I think, if 2021 wanted a tagline, that would be my suggestion. So that's number one. Number two, as far as personal productivity for the new year, I got to say I'm definitely in the new year mode where I feel like this is something that is a skill of mine, but I'm doing an even better job of stepping out, using the new year as an opportunity to get honest about a number of things that can improve the way that I'm using time. And I think there are two pieces I will share. The second I'll come back to is some effective techniques I'm utilizing right now with some of the people I manage that are useful for those of you that manage a team. I would say for me personally, I have taken this opportunity over the new year to get clear on, as always happens, there has been a meaningful amount of creep of activities, tasks, projects, things I probably don't really need to be doing that I'm doing either A, out of habit, B, because it's just been easier to do it. C, in some cases, I haven't felt I've had the right person or is appropriate to ask somebody to take the thing over for me. And I have a not small list of things that I'm looking to really get off my plate over the next few weeks. I will share part of the challenge for me mentally, psychologically, which many of our listeners may sympathize with, is candidly, the world really shrank down after COVID happened and things got very lean. And we're working with a more Spartan crew that is doing amazing work, but there aren't as many people, frankly, for me to get things off of my plate to. So I think it was okay that I was running with the ball in a lot of these things now. And I concede emotionally, I'm having a little bit of a difficulty understanding that those times are over. And I now need to go back to historically what I was pretty good at of just getting things off of my plate. I don't want to say as fast as possible because I don't want to imply recklessly or thoughtlessly or without training the individual. But going back to getting conscious and asking myself, am I absolutely the person that literally has to do this? Or is there any way at all I could have somebody else handle this on my behalf? So that's something I'm thinking about right now.
I think it's huge. I mean, even just for listeners right now, if you're not thinking about it, it's important to recognize that it is normal and it's always going to happen that your to-do list will have this kind of creep that Fisher mentioned, that things will just kind of creep onto your plate. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but it will pretty consistently happen if you are an entrepreneur, business owner in some way, leader in some way, manager in some way. Your plate will just kind of grow organically over time. If you don't take time on a regular basis, like Mark is doing now, to really get honest with yourself about what has got onto my plate and belongs here, and I want to keep here, and what has gotten onto my plate that just has no business here, that maybe it had business to be on my plate over the last 3 months, but moving forward, I really need to get it off. And that kind of auditing of what's on your plate is just so crucial. If not, we just wind up with these overflowing plates that set us up for failure every single day. And it sounded a little dramatic, but I think I do mean it that dramatically.
Yeah, because I think another piece of this that is part of this never ending audit process is also being honest. Is the thing you're doing actually adding value? Now, I
Mm,
don't have children yet, but my understanding is people tell me when you have children, you suddenly realize most of the time you're spending is wasteful. Things you actually thought were meaningful really aren't. Because another thing that I certainly been guilty of too is if I have a free hour, I'm going to fill it with something. And sometimes those things are meaningful and really helpful. Sometimes those things are a nice to have. And sometimes the things probably aren't actually getting me enough value that the juice of the time and energy invested is resultant in the correct amount of squeeze, or rather, the squeeze of the effort is not getting me the right amount of juice.
yeah.
And that can be difficult to, I think, understand in real time, because to some extent the other challenge too is, as an entrepreneur, you are constantly, ideally, thinking of the thing, you're thinking of the new thing, you're reading the books, you're thinking about the business, you're listening to podcasts, you're coming up with ideas of like, well, what if we did this, what if we did this? And there is a really insidious creep that specifically refers to just constantly adding more things. You're just constantly
Mhm.
adding more things to your SOPs. You're adding more customer service processes. You're adding more, all these things that are kind of nice to have that may or may not be moving the ball forward. So I don't have an easy, I think, hack to navigate that in a way that is super obvious, because I think the challenge is all the things you're doing feel like they're valuable or you wouldn't be doing them. So perhaps I would just encourage you, in addition to looking to get things off of your plate, make sure you're also in a dialogue with yourself and potentially with some trusted people about, is this thing something that anybody should be doing? Maybe we just shouldn't do this thing at all.
Yeah. I think there's something to that idea of just like always be auditing, not only for what's on your plate, but for your team's plate and on your business's
Hmm.
plate as a whole, right? It's just, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? And I mean that on all those levels, on yours, on the teams, on the companies, and being willing to, to just chop things off, just lop off whole limbs of the business that
Yep.
you've been doing for years that are maybe not serving you anymore. And that kind of cleaning house is just so crucial and can be so hard to do. Can be
Hmm.
so hard to do. Um, so I know you've also been thinking a lot about just kind of as a team how we get more efficient in 2022 and how we think more about our work collectively. And so, what are your thoughts there recently about how, as a team, we continue to be honest and efficient about how our time gets
Yeah.
spent?
Well, certainly one thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately, and Keeler has been listening to me prod a lot incessantly about for about a week, was I recently read the book 12 Week Year, which was good and not really mind blowing, but did bring to mind, at least for me, what was a real missing piece as far as how I utilize the projects that we focus on a quarterly basis.
Mhm.
And we've been doing a great job of having quarterly projects that every member team is really, really focused on. And the way the EOS system works, it's not wrong. And I would say this is like a flaw of the system, but you do your weekly meeting and you say on track or not track. Well, the challenge is, depending on what the project is, depending on when you're going to start it, I don't think actually that's a super effective way to do it. And now that I've read the 12-week year, it feels like the useful addition to how one makes order out of the chaos that is your business is insisting that if you have a quarterly goal, or if you have a 12 weeks ahead of you, you should create, essentially, if not a personal Gantt chart, at least a personal list of each week over the next 12 weeks. And what are the micro projects, the discrete tasks that are required to create the big projects, the big rocks, if you will, that are going to move the business forward. So this is useful not only for one's personal management, but now going through with our team and essentially requesting that all the people in MFF that I manage create a written document, a 12-week plan that I can overview. And this can sometimes be a specific document that creates a 12-week plan for one particular project, particularly if it's useful to think through this and get a sense of the other people that are going to be involved. So as an example, we're rolling out a new in-person offer. And this one isn't a 12-week plan, it's a 5-week plan. But each week I've broken it down into, here's what has to happen by the end of this particular week, and here's the person that needs to do it or own it. However, I think when you're thinking about personal management, it might be useful to go a step further with individuals on your team, because certainly some of our roles, particularly our amazing operations manager, Alex, he's got a lot on his plate. So my ask for him is, certainly he can do that for individual rocks, but I want a sense of what are his plans for each week over the first quarter to move all of these many priorities on his plate forward, because my sense is right now, through no fault of his own, because of the way that role is currently constructed, there's a lot of stuff on there, and I'm not sure they're all going to make it. And I think if we actually start to plan out, because you could even go another step where if you're looking at your 12 weeks broken down by task each week, you could approximate how much time you want to spend on all of them. Now, most people in a training gym are going to have a lot of your role, your job be in the day-to-day stuff, working in the business, so to speak. So for the typical employee in a training gym, you might have 5 to 10 to maybe 20 hours to work on the business in a very unusual scenario where you're working in a gym that really has their stuff together, that has that much bandwidth for an employee to work on the business. Well, the reality is that's a pretty constrained resource. If you've only got 5 to 10 hours per week to move those ball forwards, that's 120 hours over a 12-week period. And you can methodically go through each week. And I don't know, frankly, this is one of the things that my last thing I'll say about it is, I'm not sure how great everybody's going to be the first time they do this. I'm expecting it to be bad but that's sort of the point, right? The point is the process. The point is the planning, the opportunity to clarify and specify your assumptions for how the work is going to get done, and then be able to stress test that against an external person's assumptions, in this case, moi. And then we can stress test it against reality and sort of see what happens, and sort of, because part of the goal of all of these systems, what we're attempting to do is get better at the process of planning. And I think this is a very, very useful tool to put pen to paper or finger to keyboard, if you will. And then over time, get better at actually knowing what realistically can get done.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Fisher. And I think, just to maybe zoom out a little bit for listeners, if you are not that deep in planning yet, I think the takeaway I'm hearing from Fisher's share here is it's not enough in your planning to just know where the goalpost is, right? It's not enough to just know what the final outcome is. That can be helpful in some cases, but what's more helpful is to know what are all the milestones along the way to get to that goalpost. And I don't know if about sports, to use a sports analogy here, but I think there's probably one to be made, right? That, even a big picture example would be like, it's not enough to know that you want to win an Olympic gold medal for the breaststroke, right?
Sure.
That's just too big. It's not helpful. And then to only know whether you hit the goal or not is also not helpful. It doesn't help you get better at planning. But if you say you want to win the Olympic gold medal for XYZ sport, and then break that down into years of practice and smaller goals and milestones along the way, and then not only does it give you more clarity on your actions and more clarity on what the work looks like and more clarity on the capacity you need to achieve those milestones, but it also helps you when you reach the goal or not at the end, to look back and say, well, where was I wrong? Where was the work different than what I expected? Where was my strategy not aligned with the outcome I was hoping for? And so I think by creating these smaller milestones, I think you just become a better planner. And I think that the scale we're talking about is in 12 weeks or in quarters, right? Every 3 months, you're looking at, what do I want to achieve next 3 months? And can I break that down into weekly actions? And for some of you that might feel a little onerous or overwhelming at first, and it is, and it will be, right? And long term, ideally, it's something you just kind of get better at, becomes part of how you do the work. It becomes part of how you learn as an organization about how to be better planners and how the work gets done. So I think it's really huge, Fisher. I think it's a great tip for listeners. Go ahead. I was just going to say, if you want to switch gears, I have another thought. But is there anything more you want to say about that?
Maybe not about that. Let's hear your thought if we have time. Otherwise, I'll tease people and have to come back at another podcast.
Well, I just kind of wanted to expand on something. In a recent podcast, we did a roundtable with Unicorn Study members, and we talked a little bit about personal productivity. And one of the ideas that got brought up at the very end about productivity, and this is an idea I would love to just tease out for a few more minutes here. I didn't have a chance then. And I've been thinking a lot about this, in part because of the work I'm doing in school, but in part because I think this is something you and I talked about a lot, is how one of our barriers to productivity sometimes is how our identity is tied up to productivity. How that we identify as being someone who is more valuable as a person when we're more productive, and less valuable as a person when we're less productive. And even further than that, the place I wanted to take that even further than that basic idea is that one of the things I found for myself is when I have a to-do list that I have a lot of resistance to, where I'm very clear on what to do. It's very clear what the next steps are. It's very clear what the goals are. But for some reason, I just am not bring myself to do it. Often what I've found, and this is true not just recently, but I think just getting more and more clear about part of the resistance there is that I don't want to be the kind of person that it takes to do those things. Right?
Sure.
There's some identity misalignment, right? If I say, okay, well, if I want to achieve X, Y, and Z in 2022, who do I need to become? Who is the kind of person I need to be someone who achieves that in 2022? And sometimes when I ask myself that question, the answer I get is not someone who I want to be. Right? That to be the person who, let's just say, makes $10 million next year. And let's just be clear, I did not make $10 million this last year, right? As a business, we didn't either. But let's just say that that's the kind of the goal I have. And I ask myself the question, who do I need to become to be someone who achieves that next year? And I come up with the answer is I need to be X, Y, and Z. That's a great exercise for you to reflect on. Okay, well, is that kind of person I want to be? Just how that person needs to show up, the mindset they have, what the day looks like. Is that something that is actually exciting to me? And if not, there's the root of some resistance there, right? There's some clarity about why these tasks are so hard. At least there's something to explore. And I found that's happened to me more over the last few years as I've been interested in more things, and the kind of person I want to become is maybe different than the goals I had in mind years ago. So I bring that up just to ask you, like, how do you think about your identity being tied into what's on your to-do list and what you want to achieve?
I have to say there tends to be very consistent alignment between those, frankly. And again, I don't know how to reverse engineer that necessarily, because I think it's something I generally do pretty well. But quite literally every morning, like a sociopath, I pull out my journal and I literally read through some very specific affirmations about what's going on in my life, but importantly, not just professionally, but also with my personal health and well-being and my personal relationships that are important to me. And I set very specific visualizations of very specific goals around how all parts of my life are working. So usually I think, I don't know for sure, because I think I can't say it was a pain point before I started this practice, which I've only adopted maybe 18 months ago now. I think one of the things that's allowed me to create productivity is I feel like I have, for better, for worse, and truly for worse in some moments, I don't have a lot of ability to feign interest or do things that I don't want to do or I don't see myself doing on some level. I can't even begin the process of it, regardless of any sort of potential outcome that could be attractive to me. If I don't see myself the person I want to be in that process, it's kind of a non-starter for me. Now, there is a separate probably conversation that is maybe a little more challenging, which revolves around one's self-worth as tied into productivity, which I would say is probably like a separate thing.
Sure.
That I think is a little bit more of an ongoing thing that I'm constantly working through, that I don't have a great answer for, right? Because it's the challenging thing is, and we're keeping today short, so maybe this will be like a thing for listeners to think about, is the reconciliation between, you might argue oftentimes, as far as an organization is concerned, if you are less productive and have less output, you are worth less money to that organization. That is not the same thing as being worth less value as a human.
Yep.
And I think that gets so conflated, and it's a trap, and it's not reflective of a world we want. And it's reflective, I think, in many of the ills we're dealing with as a society, and certainly, no shortage of things for me to discuss with my therapist about. And that is something I invite people to continue to talk about that, because I know that's,
I think, we'll leave it there, because I know we want to keep it short and we can dive into a million more ideas on this topic. But I think, I'll summarize my thoughts in that is I invite you as listeners to think about, how your value as a human is intertwined with your value as a worker, right? And how your productivity is entwined or not in healthy and unhealthy ways with your work is something to explore. And the second thing I think is similar but different, which is, how your identity, the person you want to become, is aligned or not aligned with your work goals and your professional goals. Ideally, there's alignment, but if there's not, there's something to look out there and get curious about.
100%.
And I think this is worth more conversation, but we'll leave it there for the day.
Definitely worth coming back.
Yeah.
We'll have to make a note.
Awesome.
I'm sorry I didn't tell you all my other awesome time management tip for people. So hopefully I'll remember to share because it was a real good one. But I'm not telling you now. We got to go.
Teaser. All right,
I'm
we'll
back
stay
soon,
tuned, friends.
listeners.
Yeah. Share this, comment below. Let us know if you want us to have more conversations about productivity, because we have a few more things in our back pocket. And if you're on the YouTubes, don't forget to subscribe. Awesome. Have a good day, Fisher. We'll talk soon.
Farewell. Well, I hope you loved today's podcast, and forgive me, I want to remind you one more time, if you haven't already done so, head over to businessofunicorns.com, click the button, and get your free self-assessment, the Ultimate Training Gym Owner Report Card. I promise you, you're going to want to dig into this resource and get the support you need, finding crystal clarity on exactly where you need to be focusing to create a life and a business you love.